Welcome to the first of my top 10 videos. I'll be starting with the Shadowlands series, looking at what dead lore characters we expect to see in which covenants or even the more, and also looking at alive characters and which covenant we feel they are destined for. As I went through my list of lore characters and where I felt the Arbiter would place them, I ran across some discrepancies in the lore, and I've tried to answer what I could as well as I can. My first main question was, would you be judged on your actions while under the influence of a curse, insanity, spell, void, old god, scourge corruption? Yes and no. No if the corruption was unwilling. Yes if you embraced it willingly. Next, I had to exclude all demons and demon hunters, unless they die in the Twisted Nether. This meant also excluding all elementals, as they will return to the elemental plane, again unless killed in their own realm. I've left out all children, as I do believe there's a separate covenant for them which we've yet to see. I've included all races, including wild gods, lower, celestials, as well as titans and titan keepers. I'm including proto-dragons as elementals, and attempts at redemption and sacrifice may offset some prior actions. I've also wondered if there's any sort of delay between death and judgment, as there are characters I would have happily assigned to the Maw after their initial death, who are later resurrected, or does this mean that those undead are totally soulless, and thus even worse than before? I've also noticed how certain races and classes are more drawn to certain covenants, so there may be some trends showing. Some of my choices will be controversial, but I will try to explain my choices. Starting with the Maw is meant for souls who are completely unredeemable, so beyond hope that they have no place anywhere. So we're looking at people or creatures who've taken it upon themselves to be cruel, malicious, depraved, for no reason than their own pleasure, for their own power, with no thought for anyone else but themselves, and they will go through any means to get what they want. So with my top 10 for the Maw, number 10, LAO-FE, the Slave Binder. The last Mogu Emperor, whose cruelty and viciousness led to the Pandaren uprising led by Kang. He was known for deliberately separating slave families and sending their children to the Serpent's Spine to fight the Mantid and die. When Kang led the slave rebellion, the duel claimed both their lives. Number 9, SKADI the Ruthless. Among the warlike Vrykul, to earn the name Ruthless requires blood, brutality and atrocities. In SKADI's case, it was enacting the orders of King Ymron to kill all the Vrykul babies affected by the curse of flesh and smaller in stature to protect the purity of their race. Baby killer certainly equates to the Maw in my mind. Luckily, some children were smuggled to safety and led to the race of humans. Number 8, Darkmaster GANDLING. A former student of FROSTWHISPER, he then became headmaster of the necromancy school in Scholomance. A willing member of the cult of the damned, prone to temper, he's likely to turn his own students into his lab work. He participated in murder, torture and atrocities, and was a favourite of Kel'Thuzad. Number 7, VARIMATHRAS. A Nathrazim in the service of the Burning Legion, also known as the Dreadlord. He was in the Twisted Nether when he last died, so he should be found in the Maw. Involved in the torture of Ner'zhul and the creation of the first Lich King. After Archimonde's defeat at Mount Hyjal, he served the Banshee Queen Sylvanas in return for his life. He was never loyal and conspired with Grandmaster Apothecary Putris to use a new version of the plague on undead and alive, and betrayed Sylvanas. A master of deceit, trickery, cruelty and manipulation, he was later found in Antorus being tortured by the Coven of Shivara for repeated failure, where he is killed again. Number 6, Raz Frostwhisper. A former hedge mage from Stromgarde, he was among the first to happily join the cult of the damned, and presented himself to the Lich King. Taking a blade, he slit his own throat from ear to ear with a smile on his face, in return for immortality, and was raised as a lich. He joined the school of necromancy in Scholomance, and he was killed when he was turned mortal using a life stone, as he didn't have a phylactery, and he should be gone for good. Number 5. Dr. THEOLEN KRASTINOV, the Butcher. A willing member of the Cult of the Damned, he was the primary torturer of the Scholomance School of Necromancy, an apprentice of Kratonus the Herald. He provided the body parts for the necromantic experiments. He became known as the Butcher. He tortured and killed thousands, starting with the servants of the Barov household, and then the residents of KRASTINOV. With some, he would keep them alive through magical means before feeding them to the ghouls. When he was killed, he was brought back as an undead by Darkmaster GANDLING until he was put back to death. Number 4. SHEN, the Thunder King. The first emperor of the Mogu, son of a warlord, he thirsted for power from his youth. When his father was killed and the clan fell apart, he went into exile. When he found the Titan Keeper Ra and discovered the death of the Titans, he flew into a rage at Ra for his apathy. He took the power of Amun Fall and Ra's own power and imprisoned him. With the power over wind and storms, he became the Thunder King. With his power and armies, he killed or imprisoned his enemies, while others flocked to him. He saw all creatures as his servants and slaves. He duelled the celestial SHEN, and made the Jinnu, Hosen, and Pandaren as slaves, and forbid them from reading, writing, and handling weapons after executing their leaders and philosophers. He formed an alliance with the Zandalari trolls to create a ritual for resurrection. He was killed when he tried to take over the land of Uldum, and the Tolvir activated the Forge of Origination for a localized event that turns Uldum into a desert wasteland. My only concern is the Moor is meant to be unbreakable, so how was he resurrected in Mr. Pandaria? But my belief is his second life was as soulless as his first. Number 3. CHO'GALL. From his youth he was arrogant and lusted for power. When he survived an assassination by the ruling elite of Highmall, he vowed vengeance. His search for power brought him to GUL'DAN, who was forming his shadow council, and became his apprentice, but always with treachery in mind. Under Oshugan he found the Pale Orcs and the void-corrupted Naru, Ka'ura. Realizing the void offered more power than the Fel, he jumped into its study, eagerly and willingly, and brought the Pale Orcs into the Horde as the Twilight Hammer clan. When arriving on Azeroth and discovering the Old Gods, he purposefully aligned with them to bring about the Hour of Twilight, and formed the Twilight Hammer cult of all the races. He was thoroughly insane by the Second War, but his black soul was evident long before. Number 2. KIL'JAEDEN. As he was killed in the Twisted Nether, he's going on my more list. He willingly gave up his people and his planet's loyalty to Sargeras in return for power, knowledge, and conquest. His change into a Man'ari only heightened the existing flaws of his superiority complex. His first actions, some before his powers were even given, were to order the killing of all the rebel Eredar, including Velen, before they could flee with the Naru. Many were lost, and he took Velen's young son and gave him to the demonic Inquisition to torture until he became the demon Rakish. He hounded Velen and the exiled Eredar, known as the Draenei, for 25,000 years, sending Taga to search from planet to planet for any sign of where they may have settled. Each time he found signs, he would start another invasion of the Burning Legion, forcing the Draenei to flee once again. He was the mastermind behind the Orcs' war of extermination against the Draenei on the planet Draenor. He was behind multiple attempts to invade the planet of Azeroth. It's safe to say that he is behind the deaths of millions. Before we get to my number 1 choice, here are some honourable mentions. Baron Rivendare was a noble from Stratholme. A friend of Kel'Thuzad, he willingly joined the Cult of the Damned. He aided in the shipments of the tainted grain around Lordaeron. until he was exposed as a traitor. He then became a Death Knight and ruled Stratholme, and later led the Four Horsemen in Naxxramas. Necros Skullcrusher, an Orc warlock but not part of the Shadow Council. He was the jailer of the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza in Grim Patol, and would smash her eggs in front of her if she wasn't compliant, and use the demon soul to physically torture her. Salram the Fleshcrafter, a necromancer trained in Scholomance. He did not care if his test subjects were dead or alive, and stationed in Stratholme, he was later killed by adventurers. Lady Meredith Waycrest. She had her daughter's fiancé killed simply for not being a noble. Cruel and heartless, when her husband Arthur was close to death, she joined Gorrick Hall of the Drust in order to find a cure, and she formed covens of witches throughout Drustvar with no thought for the impact on her own people and land. Her motives were entirely selfish. She claims her reasons are valid, but her disregard for her people's lives puts her in the moor in my eyes. Number 1, GUL'DAN. Both of them. I'm going to focus on the original GUL'DAN story though. A deformed outcast, rejected by his clan and the elements, he eagerly joined KIL'JAEDEN, always with the intent to betray his lands and people, and relished in manipulating the only orc to show him kindness and acceptance, Ner Azul. He instigated the war to exterminate the Draenei, happily fed his people the blood of a pit lord, knowing its effects. Creator of the Shadow Council and the first Death Knights, he murdered rivals when it suited, used mind control, introduced necromancy and demonology, drained the life of thousands of prisoners to fuel the Dark Portal, and abandoned the Horde on Azeroth to pursue further power from the Tomb of Sargeras, where he met his end, ironically, at the hands of demons. Thank you for watching my top 10 of who belongs in the Moor. If you have any other suggestions on who you would like to have seen go to the Moor, or if you disagree with any of my choices, please comment down below and let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again. Bye.
This one shows promise. The whispers lure her toward her fate.